Between 1100 and 1500, roughly half of all medieval castle residents experienced temperatures so low they could see their own breath while sleeping indoors. Stone walls stood 10 feet thick in some places, drawing in cold like magnets and radiating it throughout every chamber. While we complain when our heating dips below 68 degrees, these people faced freezing to death in their own beds without a single thermostat in sight. How did anyone survive sleeping in what were essentially refrigerated stone boxes? Here's what it was really like to battle the deadly cold inside medieval castles each night. Before we start though, if you fall asleep to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I'm always curious where everyone's listening from, so comment your location and what time it is. It's wild to think some of you might be having breakfast in Tokyo, while others are drifting off to sleep in Chicago. Alright, let's head back to medieval Europe. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're gonna want to be cozy. Your eyes open to darkness. For a second, you're disoriented. Where are you? Then it hits you. The year is 1320, and you're waking up in a stone chamber of Warwick Castle in England. The first thing that registers isn't sight, it's cold. A cold so deep it feels like it's coming from inside your bones. The frigid air burns your lungs with each breath. You can actually see that breath hanging in the air like morning fog. This isn't some minor inconvenience. This is the kind of cold that kills people. God's teeth, it's freezing, mutters the servant, trying to rekindle the fire that died hours ago. His fingers are stiff, barely able to strike the flint. Unlike your comfortable bed right now, where the worst thing you might face is a slightly chilly bathroom floor in the morning, this cold is your constant enemy. Stone. That's the problem. The same material that made castles great for defence made them absolutely terrible for staying warm. And we're not talking about thin stone walls either. The walls at Warwick, a visiting mason once told me, 10 feet thick in some places, 10 feet of solid stone that soaks up cold like a sponge and holds it for days. Stone doesn't just let cold in, it actively works against you. It absorbs the freezing temperatures from outside and radiates that cold into the interior spaces. It's basically a giant cold battery, storing the chill and slowly releasing it directly into your living quarters. Not ideal. You sit up in bed, wincing as your bare feet touch the stone floor. It's like stepping onto ice. Not a great start to your medieval morning, and it's about to get worse because someone's pounding on the door. My lord the Eastern Wall Guard reports riders approaching. And just like that, you have to leave whatever warmth you've managed to create overnight. Because that's the thing about castles. They were built for war, not comfort. Medieval castle designers had one priority: don't get murdered by invaders. Staying warm was way down the list, somewhere after impressive-looking towers and good views for archery. Think about it, those arrow slits that were perfect for shooting at enemies. Also perfect for letting in freezing drafts. Those tall ceilings that allowed smoke to rise. Also created massive spaces impossible to heat. The Great Hall at Warwick could fit 3 modern houses, a historian once explained to me. How do you heat something that size with just wood and coal? You don't. You just accept being cold. Wait, it gets better. Or worse, I guess, depending on how you look at it. The layout of most castles made the cold problem even more fun. Spiral staircases connected different levels, essentially creating perfect wind tunnels. Open courtyards allowed wind and snow directly into the centre of the castle. And windows, if you were lucky, they might have wooden shutters. Actual glass was rare and reserved for only the wealthiest castles, and even then, only in a few rooms. My grandfather served at Windsor Castle, a blacksmith told me, while working on some castle hardware. Said even the king's chambers had drafts strong enough to blow out candles. If the king couldn't escape the cold, imagine what it was like for everyone else. Now picture this. You're the lord of the castle. You've got the best accommodations possible. Your bedchamber is in a tower room. Sounds nice, right? Nope, because heat rises, sure, but towers stick out from the main building, meaning they're surrounded by cold air on 3 sides. Your fancy tower room is basically a medieval refrigerator. Hold up. Let me paint you a picture. The tower room at Kenilworth Castle in winter, stone walls sweating with condensation, the tapestries on the walls actually moving from the wind seeping through the mortar, the metal hinges on the door so cold they could burn your skin if you touched them bare-handed. That was luxury living in medieval England. You know what's the real killer, a castle guide once told me during a private tour. The dampness. It wasn't just cold, it was wet cold, the kind that gets into your joints and never leaves. He wasn't exaggerating. Medieval castles were frequently built near water for defensive purposes. That meant fog, mist, and damp air were constant companions. Stone absorbs moisture, and that moisture made the cold even more penetrating. Modern cold is nothing compared to the bone-deep damp chill of a medieval castle in December. So this was the reality. Cold stone floors that felt like ice beneath your feet, walls that radiated coldness, drafts strong enough to make flames dance wildly, damp air that made everything feel wet, and winter nights that lasted 14-16 hours. In other words, the perfect recipe for hypothermia. "You're wondering how anyone survived, right?" said an elderly docent at Bodiam Castle who'd been studying medieval life for decades. That's what everyone asks, and honestly, not everyone did. Winter deaths were common. The cold took the very young and the very old first. Okay, I know what you're thinking. If it was so terrible, why didn't they just build warmer castles? Good question. The answer is that they were fighting different battles than we are. Their primary concern was staying alive in a violent world where neighbouring lords might decide your land looked better flying their banner. Stone walls kept out arrows and resisted fire. Cold was a secondary enemy. I mean, imagine your house being designed primarily to prevent people from murdering you, with comfort as a distant afterthought. That's castle life. The lord's wife appears at the doorway, already dressed in multiple layers despite the early hour. "The eastern storage room is freezing over again," she says with resignation in her voice. "The apple barrels..." You nod. This happens every winter. The food stores start to freeze, which means some will spoil when they thaw. It's a constant battle, one more worry in a long list of winter concerns. "Send 3 men to move the barrels closer to the kitchen," you say, your voice gruff from sleep and cold. That's another thing. The kitchen was often one of the only genuinely warm places in the entire castle. The fires for cooking burned nearly all day, making it a haven of warmth. Which is why, as we'll see later, sleeping arrangements weren't what you might expect. The morning light struggles through the window coverings, not glass but oiled parchment that lets in some light while keeping out the worst of the wind. It casts a dim, yellowish glow across the room, revealing your breath still visible in the air. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because surviving in these conditions wasn't just about enduring the cold. It required an entire system of knowledge, techniques, and daily practices that modern people have completely forgotten. Medieval people weren't stupid, a professor of medieval studies once told me. They were resourceful as hell. They had to be, or they'd die. And he was right. The men and women who lived in these frozen stone fortresses developed remarkably effective strategies for staying alive. Strategies that differed dramatically depending on your status in the castle hierarchy. For you, as the Lord, there were certain advantages, but even with those privileges, winter nights were a battle between life and a cold so intense it could stop your heart while you slept. So how did they do it? How did people survive sleeping in what amounted to refrigerated stone boxes? The answer involves heated rocks, clever bed designs, strategic body heat sharing, and specialized servants whose only job was to keep you from freezing to death in your sleep. The first rays of sunlight now illuminate the frost that formed overnight on the inside of the window covering. Another day of fighting the cold begins, and as you swing your legs out of bed, you realize that your real enemy isn't the potential invaders outside your walls. It's winter itself. Your steward appears, looking tired but dutiful. "My lord, shall I have the bed warmed again tonight with the heated stones? We're running low on proper fuel." You nod grimly. "Double the stones. Winter's teeth are sharp this year." He bows and retreats, already mentally calculating how to keep the household from freezing for another night, because that's what castle life was really about: survival, one freezing night at a time. And as you face another frigid day, you can't help but wonder how the rest of the castle residents are faring. From the highest noble to the lowest servant, everyone is fighting the same enemy, a cold so intense it seems alive, hunting for any weakness, any opportunity to steal the warmth from human bodies. But the fascinating part is how differently each person experienced and battled this cold, depending on their place in the castle hierarchy, which brings us to the most important survival tool in any medieval castle: the bed. Not just any bed, but a very specific kind of bed that was designed with one purpose in mind: keeping you alive until morning. The bedchamber door creaks open and a blast of cold air rushes in. Two servants enter carrying something that looks like a giant metal frying pan with a long wooden handle. Inside are glowing coals from the kitchen fire below. This isn't breakfast being prepared. This is the difference between surviving the night and freezing to death. "Mind the embers, boy," snaps the older servant to his younger assistant. "One spark on these linens and the whole chamber goes up." And he's right. The warming pan they're carefully sliding between the bed sheets is essentially a fire hazard on a stick, but in a medieval castle, this dangerous tool was considered essential technology. Welcome to the medieval bedroom, perhaps the most sophisticated survival system in the entire castle. Everything about it, from its design to its materials, was engineered for one purpose: keeping human bodies warm enough to wake up alive the next morning. The four-poster bed wasn't created because it looked fancy. It was a medieval life support system. "See those curtains?" the castle steward explains, pointing to the thick fabric hanging from the bed frame. "Those aren't for privacy, they're for survival." He's not exaggerating. The four-poster bed with heavy curtains was essentially a tent inside a freezing room. Once you pulled those curtains shut, you created a microclimate, a tiny enclosed space where your body heat could actually warm the air around you instead of instantly disappearing into the vast freezing chamber. Think about it. Without those curtains, any heat your body generated would rise straight up and away from you. The enclosed bed kept that precious warmth trapped where you needed it most. The bed itself sits high off the ground, sometimes 3 feet up. This wasn't for show either. It was strategic positioning to avoid the coldest air in the room, which settled near the floor. "The height matters," says the steward, tapping the wooden frame. "Cold air sinks. Up here, you might be 5 degrees warmer than if you slept lower. 5 degrees might not sound like much, but when you're hovering near freezing, it could mean the difference between life and death." Now let's talk about what you're actually sleeping on. The mattress itself is a marvel of medieval engineering. It starts with a layer of ropes stretched tight across the wooden frame, the original box spring. These ropes need regular tightening, which is where we get the phrase "sleep tight." Turn the crank twice a week or you'll sag to the floor, advises the lady's maid, demonstrating how the ropes are tightened. And when they're too frayed to hold, you'll need new ones. Mark it in the household accounts. On top of these ropes sits the mattress. And if you're lucky enough to be nobility, yours is stuffed with feathers. Down mattresses with a premium option, insulating against the cold rising from below while conforming to your body to prevent cold air pockets. The feather bed cost more than a year's wages for a labourer, the steward says with pride, gathered from geese across 3 counties. Beneath you would be a linen sheet, possibly, but unlike modern bedding, you wouldn't have a sheet on top of you. Instead, you'd have wool blankets. Lots of them. And possibly furs if you were wealthy enough. Sheepskins with the wool still on, explains the lady's maid. Layer them wool side down toward your body for the most warmth. And speaking of layers, let's discuss the pre-bedtime ritual that's currently underway in your chamber. The servants are moving methodically, preparing your bed with the precision of modern surgeons. First, they're using that warming pan, sliding it between the layers of bedding to remove the worst of the dampness and chill. They'll do this for nearly half an hour, moving the pan continuously to prevent scorching the linens. Check for dampness here, the head servant instructs, pointing to the middle of the mattress. If it feels wet at all, keep warming. Nothing will kill you faster than a damp bed in winter. He's right, dampness was the silent killer in medieval castles. The stone walls sweated condensation in changing temperatures, creating a perpetual dampness that could penetrate bedding. A damp bed in freezing temperatures was potentially lethal. While the warming pan does its work, other preparations continue. Hot stones wrapped in cloth are being placed at the foot of the bed. These aren't the smooth river rocks you might imagine. They're specially selected stones from the kitchen fires, often made of soapstone or granite that retains heat exceptionally well. These will stay warm till morning, says a servant, placing one carefully at the foot of the bed. Mind your feet, though. They've burned many a toe. Wait, there's more. A small brazier of coals might be positioned near, but not too near, the bed, providing ambient heat for the room. In the most luxurious castles, this brazier might burn special woods or even exotic incense to mask the ever-present smell of smoke and dampness. Apple wood burns clean, notes the steward, but oak lasts longer. Your father preferred oak. Oh, and we can't forget the foot warmer, a small wooden box with a perforated lid and handles, inside which hot coals would be placed. This would be positioned under the covers at the foot of the bed, creating a warm spot for cold feet. The Countess of Warwick lost 2 toes to the cold last winter, whispers one servant to another. Turned black, they did. The physician cut them right off. This wasn't uncommon. Frostbite was a real danger, even indoors. Extremities, fingers, toes, ears, noses were particularly vulnerable. That's why warming the bed wasn't just about comfort. It was about preventing actual physical harm. Now comes another crucial part of the bedtime preparation: hot drinks. A servant arrives with a steaming cup. Mulled wine, my lord, with cinnamon and cloves. This wasn't just a pleasant nightcap. Alcohol dilates blood vessels, creating a sensation of warmth, though actually cooling you faster in the long run, something medieval people didn't understand. The spices were believed to have warming properties according to medieval medicine. Whether scientifically valid or not, the psychological comfort of something hot before bed shouldn't be underestimated. With the bed prepared, it's time for you to get ready. And here's where medieval bedtime rituals diverge dramatically from modern ones. First, you wouldn't change into pajamas or a nightgown. Those weren't common until much later. Instead, most medieval nobles actually slept naked or in a simple linen shift. Wait, naked in freezing temperatures? I asked an historian specializing in medieval daily life. Counterintuitive, isn't it? She replied, but it makes sense when you consider the full system. Skin-to-skin contact was warmer when sharing a bed, and clothes could trap dampness against the body, which was dangerous. Speaking of sharing, beds were rarely occupied by just one person.